This is the Web Platform Podcast, a developer discussion that dives deep into all things web. We chat about software development for mobile, HDTV, wearables, robotics, user experience, mentoring, and everything related to building products and services for the web platform of today, tomorrow, and beyond.
This is episode 11 of the Web Platform Podcast. Your hosts today are myself, Eric Isaacson, software engineer at 3Pillar Global, and Danny Blue, front-end engineer at Deloitte Digital. So today, our guest is Raphael Rougeron, calling in from Toulouse, France. And Raphael and his team of developers mostly focus their efforts on working in the financial industry and building out secure and robust applications, as well as intricate cross-browser UI components. So the UI components part of his work is especially interesting because it led him to create the Bosonic Project. Raphael was frustrated with having to constantly rewrite all of his components every time, like most of us, when we switched from one technology or one framework to another. So the Bosonic Project derived its name from the word boson, which is a subatomic particle that has zero or integral spin. So interesting, it is a philosophy and supporting tool chain to assist at a very low level in building better UI components as the standardized web components specs determine them. And that includes custom elements, HTML imports, shadow DOM, templates, and CSS decorators in the future, if those are still part of it. So this shields components against potential spec changes and builds support for not-so-modern browsers like Internet Explorer 9, which seems to be pretty prevalent in government and financial industries. So thank you today, Raphael, for coming, for talking on the show. And can you please tell us a bit more about Bosonic, how it differs from other UI component solutions that are similar like Xtags or Polymer?
Yes, Bosonic is a different approach for creating web components today. So it's a bit like Polymer or Xtags, but the main difference is that you don't need a runtime to make your Bosonic components work in your web page. You only need a Polyfills platform.
What makes Bosonic different than Polymer or Xtags as far as the philosophies of how it's built?
Well, to answer that, we need to talk a bit about myself and my activity during the last 4 years. I work for little software companies that builds and hopefully sells web applications for financial services. So basically, with my team, we build single-page applications for 4 years now, and we switched a lot from library to frameworks. We started with YUI because at this time Ember was still called Spoutcore 2.0, but we built a first application with YUI, but the code was very verbose, and at this time Ember was out, so we switched to Ember, and now we have switched to React. So we found ourselves building again and again the same UI components because as our user works with a lot of data, and of course they want a modern UI with a lot of components, data grid, charts, these kind of things. So when the first web component specifications appeared, I was really excited because I saw finally a way to build reusable and independent UI components. At this time, we began evaluating Polymer and Xtags. Polymer seemed really cool, but it was a bit heavy. Especially when you combined it with MVC framework. But first and foremost, we still, at this time, had to support IE9. Therefore, we went with Xtags for our first project with web components. It went reasonably well, but at the end we felt that the lack of templating and shadow DOM composition support made the components development a bit painful, to say the least. And there was one thing that worried me with Polymer and Xtags. With the Polymer and Xtags, you depend on the library on our runtime. And for me, there should be a way to create custom elements in a way that doesn't require buying into one particular framework or library. And for me, it was the main goal of the web component specifications. If you remember, there was a draft that was called Introduction to Web Components. In this draft, you have the element tag and a sort of canonical way of declaring web components. This draft has been retired for now because there was some dependency issues with the extends attribute. I mean, if you extend a tag and when the browser try to import the tag and it does not have imported the tag it extends, it's a problem. So they have retired this draft. I think it will reappear eventually.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about custom elements draft, right?
Sorry,
you're
can
talking
you
about
repeat?
the custom elements piece specifically?
Yeah. So that was my main goal when I started to work on Bosonic. I wanted to build a sort of repository of dependency-free custom elements for the common developers. That's one more thing. Polymer elements are really cool, but I think they are very mobile-oriented, and I think today there are really a lot of developers that build, like me, business applications, and that needs data grids, charts, and so on. They need that kind of components. That's why I really wanted to complement Polymer elements with more business-oriented elements.
So, do you think Polymer is almost more of a toy at this point in its current iteration? You're talking about things that you guys are trying to build for, for business applications, for more kind of production-ready things.
It would be unfair. It's an excellent library, and they have excellent elements. But in my world, my clients are less interested by mobile concerns than by business concerns. That's the only thing.
I'm sorry. So Bosonic is basically built with desktop in mind, so not mobile first or anything like that.
Yes, it's desktop first, but of course I want to make elements that works well with mobile. For example, I want to build data grids that can correctly contract on a mobile device. That kind of thing.
Is it ready for production yet, or do you feel it's in a beta stage?
It's complicated. I think it's pretty solid, yes. I use it for production. Of course, it's not perfect, and it still needs more tests, particularly on mobile platforms. But I think it's reasonably ready, yes. I think if you're brave, you can use Bosonic in production.
So when you say that there's no like runtime dependencies, I don't know if that's exactly how you worded it, but I gathered from what you had said that there's nothing that you do everything, you make all of the code beforehand using Node, right? You're using some transpiler and some other pieces of Bosonic to build out a JavaScript file or files, and you get the polyfills obviously that would need to load. I always felt there was some object detection happening with Polymer to determine whether these things exist at runtime. That's still happening, right?
Yes, you still need a platform. It can be Polymer's platform or Bosonic's platform, but you still need a platform of Polyfills for custom elements and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting to me looking at the Xtags repository and Polymer too, and yours. There's a couple of core polyfills that are shared underneath. And then there's sort of this divergence of like you're pulling in class lists because you know that you're not going to have, like some jQuery type of selector to handle that. So you're making it easier for IE9 users because IE10 supports that. So there's different polyfills for different things. So what made you decide on just these?
I must precise. I'm currently coding a new Bosonic platform. For now, I use some polyfills from Polymer. I use the custom elements polyfill, the mutation observers polyfill, and the weak map polyfill because it's needed by the mutation observer one, I think. But for the new platform, I will use the excellent custom elements polyfill from Andrea Giamacci. I hope it is a good pronunciation. And my own Shadow DOM polyfill. But I don't think we can still call that a polyfill. It's more of a faked Shadow DOM, in fact. Do you want that I elaborate on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. The Polymer polyfill for Shadow DOM is an amazing piece of work because emulating encapsulation is very hard, and that's why the polyfill is so heavy performance-wise. For example, because you need to filter out Shadow DOM nodes when the user uses a method like query selector, you need to override a lot of DOM standard methods. But there is one thing to have in mind. For the people behind the Shadow DOM spec, people such as Dimitri Glazgov, composition was the initial goal of Shadow DOM, and not encapsulation. By composition, we talk about the distribution of light DOM nodes into the shadow tree. Of course, a good encapsulation so that your component will appear exactly as designed when included in a project is nice to have, but it was not the goal. So I choose to drop encapsulation for now in favor of performance and to keep composition with the support of content and shadow tags. It means it's not really a polyfill. When you use query selector with the Bosonic polyfill, it will return Shadow DOM nodes. It will be up to the user to be careful and to use more specific selectors.
Xtags decided to do the same exact thing that you did, from what I understand, where they wanted to make it more like for Firefox OS first, and mobile first, and so they wanted everything to be leaner, and that makes a lot of sense because as the browsers get better, then Shadow DOM will just appear in the browsers. You're not going to use those older browsers, and the older browsers need the performance because they're not as performant. So I think it's a wise move on that part.
And one more thing, when you use the Bosonic Transpiler, it will generate in the next version two kind of files, an HTML file for the Polymer platform, so it will transform your elements code into something that is Polymer compatible, and a JS and a CSS file made for the Bosonic platform. And for example, your template will be transpiled into a piece of pure vanilla JS code that build a document fragment with the nodes of your template in it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Bosonic Transpiler? Even go into some of the details for exactly what you're doing. And I know you said in the future it will also spit out Polymer compatible. So do you have plans to expand that out to other things?
Yes, of course. For example, I plan to support ECMAScript 6 classes. And I think I will support a lot of ECMAScript 6 features because in this new version I use JS Transform, which is the library that Facebook use for JS6 in React. It's a really good library for code transformation. Not only for JS6 transformation. What could I say?
Are you going to be using imports from ES6?
Maybe. I don't really know how to use imports into a web component context, but it could be interesting to have if you want to include a specific library for anything.
Right. And also, there's a couple of things I wanted to ask about that actually. So ES6, you're going to definitely do classes. One of the less well-known pieces of ES6, I think, is the template strings. So
Yeah.
to me, that's pretty interesting, and it goes against the grain, I guess, with React. But as far as like, Polymer has taken the route of let's embrace this two-way binding, similar to Angular, so we can get a lot of developers from that arena to kind of look at Polymer and say, okay, I understand this a little bit, and it also makes it a little easier to code with. But templates in JavaScript, the template strings, allow you to do these type of bindings in JavaScript through the string object using backticks. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm looking at template strings, but I'm not sure how to use that in components for now. But you talked about template binding. It's right that Polymer removes some boilerplate code you will need when building vanilla JS components, such as a lot of add event listener calls and remove event listener calls, things like that. But by the way, I hope to try another way to do that by to remove that boilerplate by using some sort maybe of annotations on top of methods.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I've learned to deal with that boilerplate because it's not as painful as you may think. Regarding template binding, I'm not a big fan of two-way binding in general. I think there are some use cases, but it's easy and not necessarily the good thing to do. It depends on your project, your context, the component you're building. So I plan to introduce a custom element for template binding, a sort of element that will extend the template, the original template element. For the rare cases, it's really useful. I think it's a good answer.
Yeah, I'm not saying either that it's right one way or the other using two-way binding or taking React's approach with the virtual DOM. I think both approaches have value. I'm actually exploring those on my own, playing around. But it is like something that, when I first looked at two-way binding, I don't know about you, but I was like, oh my God, we're littering the DOM. What's going on? This is, it's not separation of concerns here.
and that bothered me initially. But then when I saw how quickly and efficiently you could do things with the two-way bindings, I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. So I don't know. Either way, I'm sort of torn on it.
Yeah, see, I had the complete opposite reaction. The first time I saw two-way binding the way it was doing, I was like, all of my values are updating on their own.
Yeah, it's powerful for sure.
So that's actually
Yes, but it can be difficult to debug with two-way binding, because I remember when we worked with Ember.js, you have with Ember computed properties, and you have a sort of chain of change that propagates along your model properties, computed properties, and then into your HTML, and it can be hard to debug. That's why I think they have introduced some dev tools to help developers with that kind of debugging.
Yeah, Ember.js has their own Chrome plugin. Angular has Batarang. So yeah, I see I do see what you mean, and having to, if you have to introduce new debugging tools to it, it can make it a little bit, make it a little more complicated.
So how are you benchmarking performance with this?
I have not for now automated benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
I have done some on my browser, but not it's not really I don't know how to say that. I would like to have automated benchmarks to run at each build, but it's one more thing on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's a lot. Is it open for people to contribute to the platform?
Yeah, of course it's open, but the fact is there haven't been a lot of external contributors. For now, it's mainly my work, and I've been helped by some members of my team. But of course, I would appreciate a lot of new contributors.
I didn't see it recently, but I remember reading on Bosonic that you're polyfilling decorators for CSS. Is that true?
Not in the decorators was a proposed tag in the first draft, in the first introduction to web components draft.
Mm-hmm.
I plan to introduce that in the future, but it will take some time. There has been some discussions about decorators in the W3C group that works on web components, and I don't know what decorators will become.
What polyfills are you specifically using that enable IE9 support?
With the Polymers platform, the main problem with the support of IE9 was the shadow DOM polyfill. I don't remember exactly why, but it was the polyfill that made impossible to work with IE9. So the custom elements polyfill, for example, works very well with IE9. So as my shadow DOM polyfill is way more limited than the Polymers one, it was really not too difficult to make it work with IE9.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad you figured that out.
Again, it's only because it's not really a polyfill. It's just a sort of fake shadow DOM.
But getting that support in IE9 is still is pretty impressive, and a boon to other developers, because IE9 has turned into the new IE8 almost. Not as bad, but it's kind of as the cutoff for support for IE is right now sitting right around at 9, and not having Polymer support back that far, there are not a lot of cases to actually use it, but that's not the case with Bosonic.
Yeah, with our clients here at 3Pillar, we seem to get a lot of pushback on IE9. IE8 people are more than happy to get rid of at this point, which is lucky for us. I remember my last project I had to actually support back to 7 before I worked here. So I'm happy that we're up to 9 even. I'm finding more and more things about how IE9 renders and how it handles cross-domain requests that are really crazy to me. But at least it's the first version of IE that supports true JavaScript. So we got something. As far as supporting that, I think it's true because now even for business and corporations, they need to support older IE, and they're moving up to IE9, like you said, Danny. That's like the lowest common denominator for a lot of the companies now.
Yeah. In France, it's a bit of a problem because a lot of big companies still have some totally locked desktops on which they can't install Firefox or Chrome or and they sometimes have IE7 or IE8 in compatibility mode or that kind of things.
So that's what it's like. So like I work on a lot of government, like federal and local government stuff here at Deloitte Digital. So and it's the same way there. Different parts of the government will have everything is so locked down. Like you said, you can't install anything else on there. You have to use just what they have, and it takes them a long time to upgrade.
And as far as mobile support, I know it's not priority for your clients, and it's obviously running an open source project is a full-time job. So I'm sure it's hard to keep up with the support. But what is the current mobile support?
My main problem with mobile support is you need devices to test. And for example, I don't own an iPhone, so I can only test on Firefox OS and Android. And I don't really know how to build a solid platform of mobile browser tests. I think that's one of the points I need the community involved.
I know Rob Dodson was on Shop Talk Show, and he had said, I think it was Shop Talk Show or JavaScript Jabber, one of them, and he was talking about the support and they didn't do Android 2.3 support or 3 because it was a lot of extra overhead.
The older Android browser, which was not Chrome, was terrible for.
Yeah, you're being very kind to it.
I think Bosonic will never support this browser.
No one should. It's here in the States. It's strange though because you can go into a local pharmacy, and on the shelf is Android phones that you can buy that are cheap phones or whatever. And they all have running. They're cheap because they all run older versions of the OS, so they're all on 2.3. So that's like really frustrating because there's a lot of users out there who have these older Android browsers to support. So hopefully that will not happen so much soon. So if you're going to use Bosonic in a project, let's say I'm going to go build a Bosonic project, how do I get started?
Well, it depends on your project and what you need. But for now, I have only a grunt plugin. I would like to have a gulp one and so on. But I think the simplest thing to do is just to install grunt Bosonic, and it will transpile your elements instantly.
As in I saw the instructions on the Getting Started page on the Bosonic website. As far as other libraries and frameworks interacting with Bosonic, you said you're using React on projects. So are you using React with Bosonic?
For now, I'm still searching a way to work with React because JSX doesn't allow tags with dashes. So I will need to provide a way to allow JSX to support the registration of custom elements. I'm still working on that point. I think with Ember and Angular, I will need to search a bit. I'm still working on it.
Fair enough. That's one thing that's that is pretty big in the web components community right now is interoperability between these different between your homegrown custom components and using Polymer elements with X tags and things like that. So it would be cool to see how Bosonic plays with all those guys.
Yeah, I really think it's an interesting project you have. I mean, you're doing a lot of stuff that's you're trying to be as close as you can to the actual spec, which makes it really approachable, I think, because you're going to have, correct me if I'm wrong, it's more of a bare bones idea, and then you're building on top of that versus, Polymer, which has the platform. You're taking the approach of let's get even lower level, closer to the metal, if I'm understanding.
Yeah. My ultimate goal is to make Bosonic disappear. When all the browsers will have native implementations of Shadow DOM, custom elements, and so on, you will be able to use Bosonic elements without any platform polyfills or runtime or of any sort.
So sorry, keep going.
So at the end, I think there will still be a repository of elements, and it's all. And I will be perfectly happy with that.
So that's kind of what I wanted to ask, because we've heard the same types of things from some of the Polymer guys as well, that they want that their polyfill level to go away. So I was curious how you felt about all this work that you're putting into Bosonic, that you are hoping eventually becomes smaller and smaller until it's not really needed. How does that? How do you cope with that mentally?
The real fun is not in building Bosonic. It's more of building elements with Bosonic. You can just imagine how much I have learned by trying to develop basic UI elements like that. You learn a lot from the DOM, from a lot of things. It's really interesting. So I don't care if Bosonic dies. I care for. I want to have finally a real UI library in which any developer could pick a data grid, drop a tag into its HTML, and it's okay, and it works. It's my dream.
It's a nice dream. It sounds great.
So I saw that a lot of the elements that you have on there, they seem to have a common pattern. We had Zenarocha talk about his, I think it was a Yo element, where it was a generator for creating web components applications. So you could say Yo Polymer, and it would make a Polymer application, or you could say Yo element and then element name, if I remember the CLI correctly. So are you doing something like that in here?
Yeah. You can do Yo Bosonic, and it will generate a boilerplate code for you for a new element. By the way, you talked about Polymer or Bosonic applications, and it's one of the point I disagree with Polymer developers because some of them say that it could be perfectly possible to build an entire application with Polymer. I don't think it's really the way to go. I think having a custom element my app, it's not a really good way to build an application. So for me, web components are more for low-level UI components, UI elements. You see what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I know that like with Polymer, they explicitly express that they're a library, not a framework. So they want to create these elements and put these elements in. But at the same token, I see your point where we're building out applications, and I don't know, this may or may not be true, but it seems like it could be like similar to how we're doing MVC or MV Star or whatever with Angular or Ember. It's just now we're using web components in there.
Yeah, but I think you could use web components with everything, with any framework you want to use. It's really for building UI elements. I don't see the point of trying to develop applications in a tag.
Have you looked at reactive elements, which is a post by Adi Asmani? He talks about how you can create custom elements and have them become React elements too. So if you wanted to use custom elements with React together, that's one way that he had suggested that you could use it.
Yeah, of course, it's definitely possible. I'm still working on how exactly will I introduce this possibility with Bosonic, but it's definitely possible and simple.
And I noticed you have some unit tests in there, or end-to-end tests. I'm not sure. I didn't go through the actual code, but
it's more of a mix between unit and functional tests.
Was there a reason you chose Karma and not another runner?
Because it works.
True story.
Well, we worked for a long time with Casper.js for our functional tests, but the main problem of Casper is the same as Phantom.js. It's an old version of WebKit, and it's an old version of JavaScript core, which is I think the old JavaScript engine of Safari. Is that correct? So you will have a lot of basic ECMAScript 5 features that will not work with Casper.js. That's why, and moreover, for testing elements, I needed to test on real browsers, not just Phantom.js. I need to test on Firefox, Chrome, IE, and so on. So Karma this time was at that time was the best solution because it allowed me to write my test in JavaScript and to interact with the DOM in my tests. Because when you test a custom element, you need to grab a reference to the DOM node and to play with its API and to assert on the results. And for that, we build with a friend which is called Nicolas Froidure, a library which we called effroi.js. Effroi is a French word for fear. It's kind of a thing that simulates DOM events. With effroi, when you click on an element, it will simulate, it will send, it will trigger all the necessary events, mouse up, mouse down, mouse click, and so on and so on. So it tries to to really emulate the browser environment, and it worked really well.
It's pretty cool because that another kind of a pain point with custom components right now is testing and running unit tests on them, because of it's it's much different to unit test a custom element or a DOM node than it is to run a test on a function that you might write. So it's pretty cool you guys came up with a way to handle that.
Yeah, in fact, the main pain point with unit test and custom elements is the fact that the upgrade of the custom elements is not synchrone. I mean, when the polyfill how to say that, when the custom elements polyfill browse the DOM nodes to detect which one are custom elements and to upgrade these elements, these nodes, it takes some time. And so you need to find a way to wait that the custom elements are ready in order to run your tests.
There's Polymer ready for Polymer, and I'm not sure how Xtags handles it, but but how do you handle the race conditions in there? And it sounds like you've figured out a solution for that.
Well, Web Components Ready and Polymer Ready are important events, but for tests they are not perfect, because in your test you will in general load an empty HTML page, and then you will append your custom elements node. So you will still need to wait a bit of time to let the custom elements upgrade. That's why they have introduced, I think the Polymer elements have an upgraded Boolean attribute that you could use to detect if it's okay to use its API or not. It's a bit of work, but you can make it work easily.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things I struggled with trying to figure out, because I ended up using the Web Components Ready or Polymer Ready, and I still had to run a loop to check for the API, like just a recursive function to keep going through with a set timeout, because it just wouldn't load in time for the test. So it's great that we're actually moving past that. Yeah, and as far as beyond the race conditions, I guess for testing, that's pretty much it with testing. As far as in the wild, though, I mean, how are Bosonic components being used by developers? Like, is it just your core team that's using these, or is there other people using them? I saw a couple of repositories on there.
Yeah, well, for now, beside of my team, I don't know any developers that really work with Bosonic. Some have played with Bosonic, but not for real projects. I think it's kind of hard to make people interested with web components, because it's I don't know to say that. By talking with a lot of developers, many still don't see the point of web components, the point of having possibly an entire library of independent components. One of them even said to me that it was already a solved problem with jQuery plugins. So I don't know. I think with with React, we we lost a bit of a chance to make people interested with web components, because React is really cool. I don't want to say the contrary, but many people think that they only have to build React components, which will never be compatible with other frameworks. I think it's a bit sad.
I mean, to your point before, you said one of the first things you had said was you kept writing over and over the same components, right? different types of frameworks, and that happens to a lot of us. I mean, Rob Johnson's talk on the web components revolution. Copy all of the things, paste all of the things. It's you go to Bootstrap, you copy all this stuff, you put it in there. It's really amazing that people would think that jQuery solves this.
It was maybe a troll. I don't know.
Yeah, just interesting, not bad. So I mean, there's a few components on there, but no, I mean, there's definitely people have said to me too that Polymer Core, the Polymer Material Design, Brick. These are like libraries of components that you can use independently, like you said. So you're saying that devs, or maybe the devs are coming to you and saying that they want less of these things. So what is it that they want more of then?
I think they all want a data grid, but material elements are really cool. But one of the thing I really want to work on is how to make elements that you could animate with your own animations. I mean the ripple effect of material design is really nice. But what if you want to have a button with another kind of animation effect? We still have no answer to that. We have some kind of some beginning of answers. We have the Web Animations API, which is a spec or draft, I don't know, but basically it's a way to create complex animations and chained animations using only JS. Maybe the DOM lacks of a method like something like document.register animation, which you can use to which you could use to register a specific animation tagged with a name, and you could use that animation into your element. But it's a difficult point. I don't know how to handle that correctly. Honestly, it's kind of hard.
What for you makes Bosonic an exciting choice to build with?
Well, it's my project. I'm always happy to work with Bosonic and to build elements. It's kind of hard to answer that by myself. I think Bosonic could be exciting for developers the day we will have all the necessary elements to build complex UI. I talk a lot of data grids, but it's really important. My goal is to create a set of tags that will allow any developer to create his own data grid with the features he wants. Features you could do as far as either the fixed headers, column grouping, column sizing, and so on. If you could have a set of tags to build that data grid in a few lines of HTML and a single line of JS to set the model of your data grid, it will be perfect for me. So Bosonic will be a little more exciting in a few months when the new platform will be out, when I'm still working on a lot of elements like the data grids one, the charts one too. We tried for now to create charts elements using Day3.js, which is an excellent library, but we will definitely prefer to avoid any kind of dependency on a library. So we probably will rewrite this chart elements with our own tools and our own code.
And you said in a few more months you're going to have version 2?
Version 1.
Okay. Scared me. I was like, wow, that's some rapid development.
Mobile support is important. What I have, I think I need to update the website and the documentation too, because the interest of Bosonic is not really clear on the website today. I will need to write a lot of documentation about testing, because as you said, it's still a pain point for many front-end developers today. Well, I would be really interested to work with other web components developers or polymers developers. I think I need to travel a lot more to conferences, but as you may imagine, with my terrible English accent, it's kind of difficult for now.
No, you're
I mean,
fine.
the way you said it in the email, I expected much worse. So you're doing good.
A lot worse. You're kidding me.
All right. So if people need to get in touch with you, contribute to Bosonic, how do they find you, and how do they find Bosonic?
Well, I'm Goldoraf on Twitter, and Bosonic have as a brand too. And but you're right. I still lack of a Google group or something like that to allow people to exchange with us. There is the GitHub issues, but it's not really a way to discuss. The simple thing is Twitter, and my Gmail account is really easy to find.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. This has been exciting. I really like the project.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your time.
It was our pleasure.
Okay, thanks.
This episode comes to you, at least in part, through the support and sound equipment generously supplied by 3 Pillar Global. 3 Pillar is a software product development company in Fairfax, Virginia, and 3 Pillar is a leader in creating purposeful and innovative product experiences. 3 Pillar was recently named to the Washington Post Top Workplaces list for 2014. So if you want to follow 3 Pillar on the Twitters, it's at 3 Pillar Global. And to find out more and see current job openings, please visit 3pillarglobal.com. That's 3 the number, pillarglobal.com.